From Chicago's Can TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
And hello again. Welcome to another edition of Chicago Newsroom. I'm Ken Davis, and today we're being joined by Kimbriell Kelly, who is here from the Chicago Reporter, editor of the Chicago Reporter, and multimedia doyen. She seems to be on many platforms these days. And I'm also very pleased to have Mark Brown joining us today, columnist, Chicago Sun-Times, and kind of just a sage observer of things Chicago. Really glad to have you here today. Mark, I think perhaps one of the most distinguished things you've accomplished in the last few months is that you're probably one of the very few people on earth who has read the 2003 report of the Special Examination of Freddie Mac from the Office of Federal Housing Enterprise Authority. I believe you've read that.
I have combed through it, as I believe I said in my column. This is, of course, the report that has become an issue, or that some are trying to make an issue in the mayoral race because at the time some of these problems occurred at Freddie Mac. Rahm Emanuel served a 14-month stint on the board of directors, for which he made at least $320,000 for going to a few meetings. His actual contribution to the work of Freddie Mac and the problems therein are less clear to me. And he's not mentioned in the report. Gary Chico says that that the report is evidence that Rahm Emanuel looked the other way from the problems. I don't see that in the report. I think you could certainly at least conclude that the board members, Rahm Emanuel included, were asleep at the switch with some of the accounting problems. These are problems that came before the collapse of Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae in the housing crisis. These are
but if you hear Ambassador Braun tell the story, he was pretty much responsible for bringing down the economy when he was on that board. I mean, that's sort of the way I hear it. It's sort of like, hey, everything all started going bad when he joined that board, and he made millions. Well,
let me revert back to the report. The report makes it very clear.
There you go again, fact-based.
that there were two sets of on this board of directors. There's the management serves on the board of directors. Then there's the outside directors, some of whom had been there for 10, 12 years and kind of knew what was going on and were acting sort of like they were part of the company instead of the overseers. And then there were these presidential appointees who were, it's just a patronage plum.
Just kind of swoop in.
You put him on there, and they put him on there, and they make a lot of money and move on. It's a 14-month slot. So I don't really see I guess it's fair political game. You want to go there, but I don't really think it holds up that he has a great responsibility there.
We choose to bring this up, this rather dry, kind of esoteric way to begin a program. We probably lost 80% of the viewers already. I wonder. I read your column about this from beginning to end and thought to myself, I'm in a small fraternity because I'll bet a lot of people didn't make it through the past the first half of it, because it's such an interesting thing, isn't it, that we get these sound bites about Rahm Emanuel's not qualified to be mayor because he did all these horrible things. And one of the things he did was he helped bring down Freddie Mac. And then somebody, some party pooper sits down and actually reads the documents and comes to the conclusion that it's kind of...
Believe me, he didn't cover himself with glory here.
Right, understood.
I mean, he gets all this money for nothing. He certainly didn't help. But
But it's not the thing that you could say this guy, because of this, is not qualified to be mayor of Chicago.
Yeah. No, let me just, the Chico people are really mad at me about this story, and they say, well, you know, he still won't give up the minutes of the meetings during the period he served, so we don't exactly know what he did, what he knew,
what he didn't do,
what he said.
Okay.
That's a legitimate criticism. But you're right. I don't think this is the way to get people charged up. I didn't feel that I got a lot of people reading that column. But people, you know, we are seeing what issues.
Hi again. Welcome to Chicago Newsroom. I'm Ken Davis. On today's show, we've got Kimbriell Kelly joining us and Mark Brown. And
I like housing, so this conversation is okay for me.
Good. So, Kimbriell, as long as we are sort of like mired in the mayoral issues here of the day, we've got a lot of other things we want to talk about, but let's let you weigh in on this too. We seem to be down to Rahm Emanuel and Gary Chico and Duvalier and Carol Moseley Braun, and then there is there are a couple of other possibilities. One of the things that has occurred to me is reading your colleague Carol Maureen yesterday. Her column essentially just said, look, forget it, guys, it's going to be Rahm. On his podcast yesterday, I mean, that's putting words in her mouth. She didn't exactly say that, but she said it in between. Right, in between the lines, that's kind of where it is. In his podcast yesterday, Eric Zorn has said consistently, forget it, there's not going to be a runoff. Rahm Emanuel is going to win the first round. So let's just play that game here. Is this thing as sewn up as it appears to be?
Hopefully I won't have to look back at this tape later and regret what I said.
I'm not asking, let me clarify. I'm not asking for predictions because I think that's kind of dumb.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to get a sort of a psychic photograph of the zeitgeist here. Where are we at?
I mean, I think, and I've been saying this all along, this thing has been essentially sewn up since the day that he announced that he was creating some exploratory group to consider the possibility of running for mayor. I mean, you know, Tom Dart dropping out of the race, others dropping out who were, you know, viable candidates who people trusted and actually wanted to see in office. So is it sewn up? Pretty much yes. I mean, I think what people are really wanting to hear now are some of these greater issues, like about, you know, public housing, what's going to happen to public housing now, which has essentially been floundering.
Something
in
which
recent
you guys
years.
have written about extensively.
We've written extensively about public housing. You know, it's really out of the minds of people right now. We don't see all the high rises. You know, Cabrini just, you know, the last buildings came down. You don't see them anymore, so it's kind of that saying, you know, out of sight, out of mind, and nobody's talking about it. You know, the big buzzword over the last, you know, 5 years or so was mixed income communities. Well, the reality is that there's not really a lot of those communities, and when you go into those communities, people aren't interacting like, oh, you know, you're my neighbor, you're low income, come over, let's sit on the porch and talk. The reality of it is, you know, why are you, you know, saying to low income people, why do you have a chair on your patio and are sitting there? That's ridiculous. You know, and there's not this unity and this kumbaya moment that I think the city really kind of envisioned for mixed income communities. And then the reality is also you have people who are struggling to make ends meet, even more so now because of the collapse of the economy, that really need affordable housing, public housing, and we don't have basic answers to that. People are without jobs, they're without housing, and I think the person who does come in needs to, you know, be the person who can remedy that. And we're not seeing a lot of those hard, difficult discussions.
Well, and we're not seeing it certainly at the mayoral candidate level. I mean, if there's anything at all, if anything could be said about all of them, it's that they've been ducking that question as quickly as they can and moving on and changing the subject.
It was funny, our blogger Megan Contrell, she just wrote a blog post essentially saying, you know, everybody was excited, finally we're going to talk about public housing, what's going to happen.
There was a forum just on that topic.
Just on that topic. Rahm Emanuel, don't think I'm going to, everybody was going to be there. All of a sudden the day arrives, you know, Rahm Emanuel's not going to be there, Gary Chico's not going to be there, and then she kind of points out that, you know, there's a placard with Carol Moseley Braun's name on it, and obviously the chair is vacant. So I think times like that speak volumes in terms of what's really going to happen in the future, and we're still going to continue to struggle. I mean, Chicago is a great city, it looks beautiful, but we have to look at the underbelly, and you know, that underbelly is growing with people who need jobs, who need houses, who need training, and those issues just really aren't being addressed.
But Mark, the Federation of Police yesterday endorsed Gary Chico. Is that big? As Mayor Daley would say, is that big, big, big?
Marginally.
A lot of the people there said it was big, big, big. It's important. it's especially important if it's a precursor here to other labor organizations. What are the firemen going to do? What are the trades going to do? Rahm Emanuel, as much as we see him out there running alone and is getting ahead of everybody, he's picking a lot of fights here. He's picked fights with the unions, and they're going to go to their members here, and I mean they haven't. First of all, they're going to have to make a decision. Okay, do we get on board with this guy, or who's kind of like, telling us right up front that he's going to cause us some trouble, or are we going to look elsewhere? So, and if they go with Chico, then I think Chico starts to move up. I don't know how much that is, but and again with the fraternal order police, I mean, it was made very clear. They pulled their members. Their members were split between Emanuel and Chico, so they're not going to go. They don't vote. Police never vote all one way.
Right, of course.
And I'm sure there's going to be some of the African American policemen are going to go with Carol Moseley Braun. I mean, that would be history. It would show us that. Yeah. So
well, it does strike me that if you're a labor union and you want to have some opportunity to be negotiating with and involved with the municipality after the election, and that mayor happens to be Rahm Emanuel, and he remembers that you weren't on his side, that could be a pretty nasty place, a very cold place to be.
Well, politics, you know this better than me. I mean, you got after an election, things can often change. You have to make friends, whatever. But I think Rahm Emanuel is kind of jumping in there in ways that are going to be hard for labor. For one, the thing with the teachers, where he wants to take away the teachers' right to strike. I mean, that's very basic to all labor groups, and I got to believe that that's going to give everybody pause. I mean, the big issue that's out there though is what happens with the public employee pensions. And Rahm Emanuel has apparently in closed door meetings, and I started to say it. He's mentioned it in some of the public debates now. He's saying that you've got to open up the benefits, the contribution levels. And the retirement age of current city employees. Again, that's a big issue.
It is.
It takes a big fight.
But it's something that the public, we perceive the public wants this to happen. Right?
I believe that people are starting to see that this is going to have to happen.
Yeah.
Because this has gotten out of whack. But Gary Chico isn't even. He's not running away from that either. He's sort of seeming to suggest that something like that needs to be done. What he's saying is that he's more of a guy that you could work with to bargain that, to negotiate it, where Rahm Emanuel, I mean, this is a big part of the Chico campaign now, is that he's saying, that Rahm Emanuel is a guy who's just going to try to order.
Right.
There's some truth in there.
There does seem to be a little bit of this kind of unspoken. Rahm Emanuel will be a continuation of the Daley model of how to be a mayor, but I will be more of a kind of a guy you can sit down with and talk to.
Isn't it? I find it's interesting because they're both really Daley guys. They're just from different parts of the Daley universe.
Right, exactly. And also, it's probably unfair to be talking just about them as though this is where the contest is. Carol Moseley Braun is still a formidable candidate, and I personally don't buy this. I've heard discussion on other programs that her candidacy just imploded with this whole thing with the taxes, and she's out of the picture. I don't believe that for a minute. I think that to the extent that anybody can still be in the picture, she certainly would seem.
I think she's obviously still in the picture. I think that situation did implode and really negatively hurt her. I think that her chances of winning this are probably very slim at this point, particularly in the, I think people are looking at this as a race between Gary Chico and Rahm Emanuel, which I also agree, are both kind of like daily number 2.
Yeah. which daily protege would you like
which one do you want? The
yeah.
interesting thing would be if Gary Chico was able to somehow mobilize both the African American community and the Latino community to support him in this bid. I think that could actually play a huge factor in this race, in particular because the African American community seems to be very much divided in terms of the candidate that the community is supporting. I mean, people kind of came out with this backlash against the Black Caucus, saying that we don't necessarily just want one member, and then now there's like 3 different people that were the primary candidate. And so not everybody's necessarily on board with a Carol Moseley Braun for mayor, and people are seeking outside, saying, well, I want at least a minority candidate, and I think Gary Chico has an opportunity to come up and say, okay, well, let me see if I can get the support of the Black community. I haven't necessarily seen that as much as Rahm has. I haven't seen it as much as Rahm has. I mean, you have Rahm coming in, bringing in Bill Clinton, which, people in the Black community, it's amazed. They're so excited. They're like, oh, the first Black president's coming to town, and we're like, okay, Bill Clinton is not the first Black president. But, people have this idea that Rahm Emanuel is starting to become the person of, African Americans, although some people, I was a little bit turned off when I saw, Jennifer Hudson, Desiree Rogers, and, everybody coming to his aid, because it just seemed a little, people said he was sincere, but it just seemed a little off-putting, like, well, I want to get the Black vote now just so I can get elected.
So I'll throw a couple of concerts.
Exactly.
And those folks will come right along.
Music, entertainment, and then that's all I need to do.
I have to say
people.
that there's so many of these things are kind of atmospheric. You get
emotional.
This kind of weird feeling it's not driven by your intellect. It's driven by something back in the lizard brain or something. But I had that same feeling. It's like, oh, so this is how you're going to do your outreach to the communities of color. You're going to bring in Jennifer Hudson. I mean, okay, that may be a little too critical, but there is something to it. On the other side of that emotional divide is this notion that I, as a white Chicagoan, am supposed to be considering Carol Moseley Braun when the only message she's sending me is I'm Black, I'm Black, I'm Black, I'm working for the Black community. And again, we're not talking about anything intellectual here. It has nothing to do with her qualifications as mayor. It's just that kind of weird racial divide thing that we all live on this knife edge.
And it's weird because Carol Moseley Braun, if you remember back to before she even announced, she wasn't coming out as a Black candidate.
No,
she was coming out, she's like, I'm not doing the race card. I'm coming out as a candidate who's I'm a former senator. I'm standing on my credentials. I'm about local policy as well as international policy. She's really big into the green thing. And, she really never said, I'm going to be the Black candidate. And even when the caucus chose its #1 candidate, she's like, you know what, I'm deciding to run for mayor anyway. So I think that if people do have that perception, that doesn't seem to be where her priorities are lying.
But to turn this back around to the reporter, which you represent, you're the editor, and one of the many things that you've reported on recently that I think is so germane to this, and yet we just don't talk about it, is this notion of what the real unemployment numbers are in our city. I mean,
Ken, don't get me started.
Well, I want to get you started. Get started, Kimbriell.
We have a story that just came out in our issue, actually. This is people, when we hit the 10%, I think it was almost 2 years ago now, maybe a year and a half ago, everybody was just so upset when we hit double digits for unemployment. And I think it was obviously a watershed moment in history, at least recent history, and we should be very, very concerned about that. But when you actually break down these numbers in Illinois, in the city of Chicago, by race, in journalism, they teach you to look for the extremes, right? The highest number. The highest number of unemployment isn't just for Chicagoans. When you look at race, Black men in particular have the highest forms of unemployment. And we're not talking about people who aren't looking for jobs. We're talking about people who are in the workforce. And we're not talking about 10 or 12 or 14%. We're talking about 20-something%. I believe it's like 22, 23% of unemployment. These numbers come out about once a year when they break it down by race. And I'm wondering who's sounding the alarm. Recently, Jesse Jackson Jr., he's been doing a lot of work on that. And he's saying, we really need to tackle this issue. And one of the things I would like to see the city do or whoever's running for mayor is, when we talk about unemployment, let's not focus on just the 10%. Let's look at the people who are in the 20% number, because you cannot ignore that. That's essentially 1 in 4 people. So if I lined up African American men, 1 in 4 is out of a job. That's a huge number.
Not to interrupt, but there's a really critical key piece of this, though. You're not even talking about 1 in 4 African American men. You're talking about 1 in 4 African American men
in the workforce. In the workforce.
And
want a job.
Many have never been in the workforce. So if you talk about how many, if you could take every citizen of Chicago who is African American and male and put them all in the room and then say, okay, now everybody who has a job step forward, you'd have a lot more than whatever those numbers are. You'd have a lot more than 60% standing back.
And I think the misnomer is, some people say, oh, well, they're lazy or they don't want a job. No, that's not the case. These are people who are employable, who have skills, who may be unemployed. And we started highlighting in our magazine these people. People with, master's degrees, PhDs, who are looking for work and are just not able to find it. These are not people who are lazy. These are people who really need a job.
And again, it would be, I suppose, impossible to make this a mayoral platform. You can't really say, you can't run for mayor by saying, oh my God, look at all these African American males who are out of work. If you make me mayor, I'll fix it, because it's not that easy to do.
Well,
so maybe it's like
I do think all the candidates, have made jobs, a major issue so far. I mean, I think, as you guys started on this road, I was trying to think of what their actual platforms are in this regard. But they do. I will say, in their defense, they have. They do perceive this as an issue, and they are making some kind of promises in that regard. I mean, it's the old thing of whether or not a mayor really. Well, how much can a mayor do?
How much can a mayor do?
But I think it's the reality. I mean, people can understand that it's a problem, then do something about it, then fix it. We can't call ourselves a city that's working. When the city isn't working, we have this number. In Illinois, 1 in every 3 black people aged 20 to 24, 33.1% is unemployed. That's completely unacceptable. You have the next generation of people who are going to be paying, taxes who aren't working. How are they going to be paying taxes to fund all the infrastructures and services that we're, cutting consistently in the city of Chicago and in the state of Illinois? It is a definite problem that needs to be addressed. And it's going to take more than people just acknowledging that there's a problem. Action needs to be behind that.
Now, I want to just kind of turn the topic a little bit here, just because we're down to our last few minutes. I wanted to get your perception on something. I've been to a number of these mayoral candidate forums, and I'm sure you've been to them or seen them or participated in some way or another. And I got to tell you that maybe I'm naive, but I'm left with an impression that we've got a crop of, I don't know, I would say fairly exceptional people. I mean, they seem to me to be very bright, engaged people. It's too easy to just trash them all. They seem genuinely interested in being mayor. They seem like they really want to tackle some of these problems. I think that's true of all of these candidates.
The front runners and the people who aren't getting a lot of attention. Your Pat Watkins. Oh my gosh, she doesn't get a lot of media attention, doesn't get a lot of write-ups in the newspaper. She's a fantastic candidate. I think that's a lucky part for Chicagoans, is that you have a good group of people to choose from. The unfortunate part is that obviously some people have the financial advantage, so they can run all these commercials and get more attention than other people.
Am I just being stupidly naive?
No, I think I've been, the thing that's most struck me from, now I've seen them in two debates now, the debate at the Tribune editorial board and the debate with the Mikvah Challenge group at WTTW this weekend. We have 4 good, serious candidates who can talk about the issues, and they're serious people.
So were you actually at the Tribune editorial board?
No, they streamed it live. They streamed it live online.
That's news.
It was a good show.
Interesting.
It was a good show.
It was a good show. In fact, there was some discussion I heard yesterday about that was probably the best TV debate of all, and that's the one that we should be using to judge. We got a minute left. Can you put some perspective on the Toni Preckwinkle thing? Is she going to be, and I literally mean a minute, is she going to be able to pull this off, to pull the budget down as far as she wants?
Probably not as much as she wants. I mean, it was on Chicago Tonight last night. Tom Dart was basically, it sounds like he's going to be giving her a lot of pushback, essentially. He said maybe 5% I can cut, but 16%, that's not going to happen. So she's probably not going to be able to reach that goal, but she'll be able to cut.
Okay, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. And these shows go by so fast, we'll just have to ask you again, as always, come back again and we'll carry the conversation on. Mark Brown, of course, columnist for the Chicago Sun-Times. Kimbriell Kelly, editor of the Chicago Reporter. And you got a show on Vocalo tomorrow, radio, the Barbershop Show, right?
Live at 12 o'clock.
Live at 12 o'clock. She's got Miguel Tavaya. Take a listen to that. I want to tell you a little quick thing about something. If you watch this show a lot, you might notice we've got a little bit of a different set here. We don't have a lavish budget, and we wanted to have a nice, comfortable little table, so we found some people who would make us one for free. And it's a very cool story because this table is made out of parts of houses in Chicago that were torn apart, and it was built by ex-offenders. So how cool is that, huh? Here's the story of how we got this table built. The story of our table begins here at the Rebuilding Exchange. It's Chicago's first building material reuse center. As a part of its mission, the Rebuilding Exchange diverts building materials from the waste stream and makes them accessible for affordable reuse. Its efforts help protect community health, and it saves resources. Equally important, the Rebuilding Exchange partners with the Safer Foundation to offer job training to ex-offenders. This effort is supported by a City of Chicago Green Jobs stimulus grant. Elise Zelikowski is executive director of the Rebuilding Exchange, and she took the time to show us around.
Well, the Rebuilding Exchange was really started to address the fact that we have a lot of building materials ending up in the landfills that shouldn't be. And what we were finding is that there just wasn't a great kind of marketplace for these materials to be redistributed, and there wasn't a lot of education about how to handle them and get them to a place like this for resale. So we started the Rebuilding Exchange to be a solution to that, to create a retail outlet where you could come and find everything from reclaimed lumber to toilets to doors and windows, and have friendly staff that would help you figure out how to reuse them. What we were finding is people were really inspired by a couple of just kind of fun example projects that we did with some lumber. And so we started to really test out some products, and we started a job training program at the same time in partnership with the Safer Foundation through a City of Chicago grant. And we came up with this entire shop curriculum around transforming our materials into new products.
So that's why we turned to you. That's why when we needed something, we needed this really cool table. What better to do than to have it made out of an old house?
Fantastic. We're really excited to be able to work on this.
Cynthia Main is the shop trainer here.
We have a new shop program where we're training former offenders, people with criminal backgrounds, who get into the program, wide range of skills. Some of them never use a tape measure. Others of them had been in construction for a long time. It's been a learning curve for everybody, but it's a training program. So, I'm pretty proud of what they're making. Now I feel like we're at a place where we can take small jobs or make things that go out into the public.
Well, you've taken on our little project.
Yeah, we're excited. It's a good combination of challenges, just getting a project with angles and things like that, how to do a layout. It covers some of the basic skills that, it's still pretty straightforward. Making one big glue up, making one countertop. But how to do the pattern, I think, was really interesting. How to take something from a drawing and then blow that up to scale, I think, was a good challenge. And then they're going to weld the base, so it's covering a lot. It's within the realm of what we can do.
Well, on behalf of all of our viewers, thanks for helping us make this wonderful set.